Ready? Call to order a regular meeting for the Normal Town Council for February 5th, 2018. Please call the roll.
Mayor Kus.
Here.
Mr. Fritzen.
Here.
Mr. McBride.
Here.
Mrs. Cummings.
Here.
Mrs. Lorenz.
Here.
Mr. Preston. Mr. McCarthy.
Here.
We'll begin with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. There were no requests for public comment tonight, so we move right into the omnibus agenda items considered routine and will be handled by one vote unless a council member would like to pull an item for discussion.
Move approval. Second.
Items on the omnibus for consideration are approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of January 16, 2018, and approval of Town of Normal expenditures for payment as of January 31st, 2018. A resolution authorizing the execution of an intergovernmental agreement with McLean County for centralized booking services. A resolution approving a lease amendment for the Heartland Theater Company at the Community Activity Center, and an ordinance abating the levy of 2017 property taxes for the Special Service Area Number 1, something that's warm in the heart of former council member Fazzini, sitting in the audience tonight. Please call the roll.
Mr. Fritzen.
Aye.
Mr. McBride.
Aye.
Mrs. Cummings.
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz.
Aye.
Mr. Preston. Mr. McCarthy.
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye, the omnibus agenda is approved. We have one item of general orders tonight, and that is a resolution approving the 20-year materials recovery and resource solid waste management plan for McLean County, Bloomington, and Normal, Illinois.
Move approval. Second.
As you'll recall, Michael Brown from Ecology Action Center, who is here tonight, gave us a pretty in-depth overview of that a couple of meetings ago. So if there are questions or concerns or comments, now would be the time. Mr. Preston?
I have a question. I don't know if this is for staff or not, but in the plan itself, it talked about the amount of recycling that is currently going to the landfill here in McLean County that can be recyclable, and was wondering if we had any indication as to how much of that is actually from multifamily residences here in Normal compared to our single stream for single family.
Between Mr. Aldrich and Mr. Brown, we'll have them come up. I'm not sure they can give you a definitive answer on that particular question, but maybe they'll surprise me.
So unfortunately, no, I don't have a good breakdown of that. The quantities that we know that's being landfilled that is recoverable is based upon studies done both, our data collected, but also by the Illinois EPA. And so that just shows us the composition of waste that is being landfilled. We don't actually know which sectors exactly that's coming from, but we do know that, yes, multifamily and commercial recycling are not well addressed in the community currently.
I guess as a follow-up, do we have any indication as to within multifamily residences, what percentage of those are served by area disposal compared to Republic Services?
We don't have that data either. That tends to be proprietary information with the companies.
Those are the two primary
Yes,
service
yes,
providers.
correct.
Yeah.
I would add, as part of this plan and part of the council discussion on the budget, we're starting to meet with all the private carriers to just discuss the future and where they play, what their role may be in this plan, including multifamily pickup.
And then I guess just a follow-up thought as to, where I was going with all of this. A big starting point in this plan focuses on our landfill being at capacity here shortly this year. And, as there's been a lot of discussion about multifamily recycling, I want to make sure that we have a full understanding as, one of the major carriers for multifamily waste, area disposal, does not send anything, unless I'm mistaken, to the McLean County landfill, thus not contributing to that because they have their own landfill facility in, I think it's Clinton. Is that correct?
That is correct. They have a couple Central Illinois landfill facilities, and so yes, that assumption I think is correct. I don't know that it's a universal. There could be instances where they might use the McLean County landfill, but generally I believe they would prefer their own.
Okay. And so I guess the level to which, the concern over the landfill's limited capacity, to which that is connected to multifamily recycling. I'm still trying to reconcile, and it sounds like we just don't have enough data to know, what the entirety of that picture looks like.
Well, if I may, Mr. President, McLean County landfill is pretty much done. I mean, I think it's there in the start of the closure process. So any, any recycling, residential or commercial, from this point forward will not have any impact on that landfill because it is, by all intents and purposes, closed. It will, of course, have an impact on other landfills in the region that we will be using, but nothing will impact that landfill any longer.
And if I may, so yeah, this plan is more about cost controls going forward over the next 20 years and asserting those where we can.
Are you done, Mr. Preston?
For now.
Ms. Lorenz?
Okay, just kind of sparked a question or a clarifying comment maybe for you, Mr. Brown. This is a plan, and the real devil is in the details, assuming we adopt the plan. Looking at the multifamily property owners, have you begun any kind of dialogue with them up to this point, and what has been their sentiment? Some may already be using, like you mentioned, the area disposal company. Can you comment on that and what you foresee in terms of the future working with them?
Sure. And so, yes, through the plan development process itself, we did have rental companies involved, representatives from them involved in some of the discussions, as well as earlier this year last year, during the review process, did engage with them at that point as well. And so I think the idea of recycling, well, currently there's some, but very few that do offer recycling to their tenants. The idea that was brought up as far as potential eventual, regulation requiring that of rental companies, that was actually met surprisingly with a high level of support in terms of actually, as it was discussed there and phrased by some of the rental companies, that would level the playing field for them. And so if they're all offering the service universally, that would actually assist them in a lot of ways. I think there was one company that objected to that meeting, saying that, they would like to be the standout and be offering it. And so we suggested, well, they could go ahead and do that, at this point before there were any, more universal approaches. And so generally we haven't heard, resistance. And it was, yes, again, them that suggested that the level playing field could be a benefit.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Fritzen?
Yeah, I think Ms. Lorenz referred to this a little bit, but the plan is something we need to have one in place, and I think we're fortunate that we have an organization locally that is able to work with us on this, as opposed to a situation where we might have to bring in a consultant or the staff might have to work through this. So we appreciate the work that has gone into this. A question that, and again, I think if and when at such time we proceed to try to, put an ordinance forward for the either multifamily or the commercial waste disposal or whatever, the construction waste. I think the details of how those work out and how those might be implemented and whatever, I think is where there will probably be a lot more discussion. But the question that kind of came to mind as I was considering this is, when it comes to the construction, demolition, recycling, is right now most sites just have a dumpster and it all goes in there, and whereas for the homeowners and whatever, and that type of recycling, that's gone to a single stream where it used to be separated. Is the commercial that construction and demolition, would it be single streamed and somebody at the back end would sort it? Or would those filling the dumpsters have to have different types of dumpsters for different types of materials?
They can go either way. And so we are actually fortunate. We're one of the very few downstate communities that does have essentially a single stream construction waste sorting facility. That is the Henson Disposal Facility located outside of Bloomington. And so that is what they do. That is kind of the large-scale equivalent of Midwest Fibers, that they take a roll-off of dumpster of construction materials and sort it out. And so that would be one route. But in other places, it is also where there might be an ordinance of this kind, it would be allowable for source separation on-site by the demolition company. So they could separate out steel, wood, other materials, and use whatever vendors they choose. And so I would suggest that either way could work.
Yeah, just trying to anticipate if there would be an objection that that we would be creating an additional cost by requiring that. And like I said, we'll get into that policy question at some point in the future, I imagine, but.
Sure. And even in the plan, it does suggest that there could be a safety valve put into any such ordinance there, that if the cost of using a C&D recycling facility exceeded, say, 10% of what it cost to landfill the same materials, that exemption could be written in. That's been used elsewhere.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. McBride.
Well, I believe I said this last time, but I might as well say it again. Mr. Brown and the Ecology Action Center are to be commended for your excellent work and all the consensus building and just the sheer number of hours and the amount of research that went into putting together what is a pretty ambitious plan. And to do it on a 20-year horizon as opposed to every 5 years, obviously there's always ample time to adjust should we need to, but I think that's a very good thing. I'm already on the record as being completely in support of a multifamily recycling ordinance. I look forward to that coming before us in coming months. As my colleague said, C&D could be a little bit more complicated. We'll see what happens there, but overall, good work, and thank you.
Thank you.
Further discussion on this item? Mr. Preston?
Yeah, I've got a little more, Mayor. Thanks. To echo Mr. McBride's comments, thank you, and to the team and all those who were involved in this. 2 years, that's quite a dedication to a plan that I think will, is set forth to serve this community well for 2 decades, and I certainly commend you guys on that as well, and appreciate the effort and all that went into what is before us tonight. I guess the one thing that I'm still, having a difficult time reconciling is, in terms of the ordinances, if that language was not in here, there's still nothing that stops this body or Bloomington's council or any other, appropriate governing body from still pursuing any, an ordinance that would mandate, whether it's commercial or multifamily recycling. If that language is not in here, that still really doesn't have an impact as to whether or not we can take up and discuss an ordinance or not. However, that specific language being in this plan it promotes the idea of an ordinance that, is not drafted yet, I guess, and one that, I don't know if it's been discussed or if it's been decided. So, if multifamily recycling, let's, take that as an example, if, in the ordinance that, is likely to follow, if multifamily recycling is not offered, then what? And I don't, until kind of having a full grasp of the picture, that's the one that this, advocating for potentially having ordinances in here when that language isn't necessary to achieve that same goal. I've wrestled with that quite a lot, and that's something that I still continue to have a difficult time with.
Is it a comment, or are you making a recommendation, Mr. Preston?
Just a comment.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, and the suggestion in this plan of the idea of mandating recycling in any form is offered as an option. trying to meet fairly ambitious recycling goals that are set forth in this plan. And we've certainly improved over the years with our residential recycle program and trying to make recycling as convenient and accessible as we can. We've sort of begun to plateau, and there's still a lot of material going into the landfill that really doesn't need to go in there. And that's, there's cost involved and certainly just the environmental impact. So I think what the plan attempts to do is lay out a variety of alternatives that can be considered to try to move the needle on our recycling performance. And ordinance is one option. It's one that you can look at or not look at. A lot of communities have done it. There are many communities around the country that mandate recycling for everybody. We've not done a lot of that here, so it's a big step. But Mr. Preston, you're exactly right. Whether it's in the plan or not does not preclude the council from looking at it or not looking at it. It's in the plan, just suggest it is one of many alternatives available to try to meet the goals that are set forth, fairly ambitious goals, and I think appropriately so, in this plan. Staff received what we thought fairly clear direction from council to at least begin to investigate an ordinance for multifamily recycling before this plan was even in front of you. And we are doing that, and we are looking at other communities that have developed similar plans, and we'll come back with an ordinance to present to you to at least consider at some point in the fairly near future that would would require multifamily property owners to provide an on-site recycling option for their tenants. That would be up to you to accept, reject, or modify. With respect to C&D waste, that's another one that's been on our radar screen for a long time. In fact, we felt that we should wait at least until this plan was adopted before we brought something forward. But we've been working on that at staff level, even having conversations with our neighboring city about that for a number of months. And again, if you look at the fact that 28% of the current items going into the landfill are C&D, it's a lot, and much of that material does not need to go there. It simply doesn't need to go in the landfill. And I think when we actually present detailed numbers, you'll find that the cost of recycling really is marginally more expensive, may not be any more expense to recycle than it is just to have it gone to the landfill. So, but those are items we'll bring back to you here in probably, I would say, the next 30 to 45 days for you to consider. And obviously, you can accept those recommendations or modify them or choose to do something completely different.
Thank you. Further? Please call the roll.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Cummings?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
No.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The resolution is approved. We have one item of new business, and that is a motion to approve an appointment to the Human Relations Commission.
Approval.
As this is an item of personnel, there will be no discussion unless a council member would like to take this to an executive session. And consistently, you do not, so please call the roll.
Mrs. Cummings?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. Mr. Fritzen, would you read the appointment?
Sure. I'd like to announce the appointment of Mr. Jay Tamala to the Human Relations Commission for a full 4-year term, which will expire March 31st, 2022. Mr. Tamala moved to the United States 17 years ago when he accepted a job opportunity with IBM. After moving to the United States, his interest in IT led him to State Farm, where he's employed as an analyst. Familiar face throughout our community, a graduate of the Multicultural Leadership Program, co-chair of the Minority and Police Partnership, dedicated volunteer at the Ecology Action Center, and Community Healthcare Clinic. Mr. Tamala enjoys spending time with his wife and 2 children. Welcome him to one of our important boards.
Thank you. Before taking a motion for adjournment, are there comments or concerns? Ms. Cummings?
I would like to make a comment tonight,
Certainly.
if I may ask for a point of privilege in this particular case. And I know we talked a little bit about it, but I really was looking forward to highlight the fact that we have some state recognition. And the article itself was a great read. The Illinois Municipal League featured our town on the cover, but the article was on how small downtowns grow, and they only picked 3 cities in the state, one being an outer suburb of Chicago, one being an inner suburb, and a downstate, and we were the downstate city that was highlighted. What really took me by surprise was the introduction, where it talked about many downtown districts that were historically quite small have made a comeback in recent years. A half-century ago, as retailers left them in droves for malls and strip centers, these places may have seemed all but obsolete. Today, in response to sustained revitalization and investment, however, numerous downtowns of this type have become the showpieces of suburban and downstate communities. Nevertheless, the number of success stories remains limited, and experience shows that strategies successfully used by some can be hard to replicate. This study examines the recent redevelopment history of the small but expanding downtowns in Elmhurst, Naperville, and Normal. All 3 had successful outcomes, yet developed in fundamentally different ways. And I thought this was a great example of the work that we put in and how great our town is. And I am so pleased to be able to represent all of you.
Thank you. Further comments, concerns?
Move we adjourn.
Thank you.
Second?
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz.
Aye.
Mr. Preston.
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy.
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen.
Aye.
Mr. McBride.
Aye.
Mrs. Cummings.
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.